Next to speak is Mark Yanno. Good. Is it still morning? Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I've written my comments because I thought we were limited to a certain amount of time. I'm going to read those comments, but then I'm probably going to add a little bit at the end.
And Mr. Yanno,
Yeah, we don't really.
we do have a 3-minute limit, but listen, we don't, obviously, we want the public to be heard in this. This is something where, I don't think anybody in here is ashamed of any opinion. I'm not ashamed of mine. I want you to hear mine, and I want to hear yours. And that the chairman's gracious enough to waive that, so there you are.
Well, I'm not much of a public speaker, so writing it's better anyways. My name is Mark Yanno. I live at 1695 20th Place Southwest. I have been a local fishing guide on the Indian River Lagoon for 19 years. Prior to that, I was a biologist working for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service in Vero Beach, and prior to that, I worked as a biologist for the State of Florida Aquatic Preserves Office in Fort Pierce. For many years while working as a biologist, I was responsible for reviewing development projects such as the Oslo boat ramp expansion, and I have recently spent days reviewing this project. I will not go over all the biological aspects of this project, as they have been thoroughly presented many times, nor will I stress the vital importance of keeping the Indian River Lagoon healthy, as its plight has been printed in the newspaper continuously for years. I am here today to mention a few indisputable facts and to ask but one single question. My friend Gary Reinhardt, who owns a tackle shop near the project site, started a controversial petition for this project many years ago. He now resides largely in Titusville, and aside from county officials, I have not seen much public support for this project since then. Contrary to some statements, I don't know a single active fishing guide that supports this project. The Oslo boat ramp expansion project has been officially opposed by every regulatory agency and environmental group that has reviewed it. I have reviewed this project myself and concur with its inconsistency with state and federal regulations and its negative impact to the Indian River Lagoon system. Only when State Representative Popple visited the St. John's Water Management District office in Palatka and Congressman Posey sent a senior staff member to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service office in Vero Beach were negative agency positions reversed. I would hope that the backroom deal for a proposed ordinance to make manatee speed zone regulations more strict in our county will be open for public comment. It will be interesting to see if the numerous boaters in our area respond favorably to the proposal for increased boating regulations. Regarding the, quote, need for this project, our county currently has twice the amount of boat launching facilities recommended by the state of Florida. As a guide who spends my life at local ramps, I have never experienced a problem with space at the existing facilities. Also, it is my understanding that not a single, quote, safety incident has ever been reported at Oslo Road, according to the county when they were asked. Most importantly, the entire project location is within conservation lands designated as the Oslo Riverfront Conservation Areas. The filling in of 1.4 acres of valuable coastal wetlands and impacting seagrass that has declined so greatly in the Indian River Lagoon is clearly not consistent with this conservation designation. Numerous acres of the project area were purchased with Florida Forever grants, which include binding conditions that state, and I quote, "The existing seagrass beds, wetlands, and mangrove communities shall be preserved," end quote. That's a condition of the grant that was given to purchase a lot of those lands there. Additionally, it is a fact that wetland mitigation, such as that being proposed off-site, regularly fails to replace the total function of destroyed natural areas. You may get a vegetative community there, but that doesn't mean that it replaces the function of the natural areas. These conservation lands and existing boat ramp have been in relative harmony for over 50 years. The existing road of natural Florida materials has shown no indication of negatively affecting the thriving natural resources. Commissioners, I urge you to stop spending valuable county funds on an environmentally damaging project most residents do not want. The Indian River Lagoon is clearly in peril, Sorry about that. The Indian River Lagoon is clearly in peril, and any additional impacts added, and does not need any additional impacts added to it. In fact, we should be reversing impacts, not creating more. Since we are fortunate to live in the healthiest section of the entire Indian River Lagoon, let's keep it that way as an example for other counties to follow. The opposition to the Oslo boat ramp expansion is overwhelming compared to any advocacy other than that of government officials. The project will clearly have significant negative environmental effects in an area designated for protection of the very resources that will be destroyed or negatively impacted. So my one question for the Commission today is this: what is driving this project forward against all reason and all opposition? Maybe it is to help encourage additional development in South County now that an I-95 exit has been approved.
Okay.
Most of the lagoon, this is some ad lib here, most of the lagoon north of Vero Beach has lost the majority of its seagrass. We do live in the healthiest section of the lagoon, probably due to the flushing that we get through Fort Pierce Inlet. Sebastian Inlet has the Sebastian River there that dumps an awful lot of runoff in there, so it doesn't have the benefits of flushing like Fort Pierce Inlet does. And further south, you've got the St. Lucie River that brings runoff from Lake Okeechobee down, so that area further south is got some issues. But we live in the healthiest section here. And with this new I-95 exit at Oslo Road, I would imagine that that's going to encourage people from Melbourne, Grant, Sebastian, areas further north where there is not healthy seagrasses, to come down here and access what I consider to be the healthiest section of the Indian River Lagoon. I request that this very simple question that I asked be clearly answered here and now. But before my question is answered, I have one final comment with regards to my written comments. I am gravely disappointed with you, Commissioner Zork. You took $50,000 from a friend of mine for your committee to help the Indian River Lagoon, and then you vote for a project that will clearly further its demise.
Excuse me.
I'm going to wrap this up.
Clarification, could you, I did not personally receive that money. I'm on the board of a nonprofit that the money was sent to. I did not receive anything personally from anybody, but I do know who you're speaking about, and he's an outstanding person. Thank you.
He is at that, and very disappointed that you voted against this project when you portrayed yourself as an environmental commissioner. Anyways, moving on. I'd like to make a comment with regards to trailer size. Maybe Representative Popple should come here and testify to maybe give more specifics to this, but I can tell you from experience that the size of the vessel that you can launch depends largely on the size of the tires that you have on your trailer. In order to get a boat of whatever size off a trailer, it has to do with the height above the bottom that the trailer is sitting on. If you have a trailer with very small tires, and hence the trailer is sitting low in the water, you can launch a considerably large size vessel. So I would argue that the size of the trailer tires and the height that trailer is above the ground is going to be the factor, not so much the length of the trailer.
Mark, if I can, just like I say, I do agree with you. I think that somebody maybe with a 18 or 20-foot flats boat, which would have smaller tires because it's a much lighter boat, probably could launch there. I don't have any problem with that because it's a flats boat. It's not going to draw very deep. I don't have a problem. I think that's an appropriate boat for that area. I could see a 20-foot pontoon boat launching there with, again, small tires. I agree 100% with you. My boat, 22-foot center console, is very heavy. I've got really big tires. The boat's up on bunks. I draw more water. My boat can't launch there, just for the very reason you said. My tires are big. I can't get enough water to float it off.
Get smaller tires.
So, but I do agree. But, I would think an 18-foot flats boat, a 20-foot pontoon might be able to launch there for the very reason you're saying. But I think those are appropriate type boats because they draw so shallow. So
Right. And I'm
agree
not
completely with your comment.
I'm not making a big deal so much about the size of the boat. Again, I worked for environmental regulatory agencies, the state and then the federal government for years reviewing these projects. And I have to say it's been 20 years almost and things haven't changed much. But the reality of it is secondary impacts are rarely considered by agencies. They're supposed to, but they get overlooked. And the fact that what you've got here is a boat ramp that's been existing for 50 years as basically a dirt road through the mangroves with a tiny little launching facility. Historically, it's been used mostly for canoes, kayaks, small john boats, as Paul mentioned. And there's a lot of people that don't launch there because the road is not in great condition. I mean, it's a dirt road. And the facility at the end of the ramp is designed more for smaller boats. So there's a lot of people that don't use that ramp for that reason. The entire area that this boat ramp is in was purchased for conservation. The county's manatee protection plan, as well as the county's comprehensive plan, talk extensively about this area being for conservation. Okay, and what's being proposed is not a passive use. It's not a non-consumptive use. You're talking about essentially expanding a boat ramp that's a very minimal facility right now and doesn't get a lot of use. Now that we have an I-95 interchange coming in, if you build it, they will come. I'm sure people have heard that expression before. And if you improve this boat ramp, more people are going to use it. Anybody that would dispute that is, well, anyways, that's an indisputable fact. There will be more activity in the area if you put 12 parking spaces in there, a paved road, and dredge a portion of the channel. There's an aquatic preserve that sits directly in front of this boat ramp facility. What you're doing is you're encouraging more use, whether you want to state that you are or not. You're going to be encouraging more use in an area that's designated for conservation within a state-approved aquatic preserve in front of it. So the disturbance factor, the impacts, as Mr. Solari pointed out, even if people don't intend to do it. I worked in the Florida Keys for a bunch of years, and the prop scarring down there is out of control. I don't think most of those people are intentionally prop scarring the seagrass beds. Maybe some of them are, but I doubt it. Most people don't want to ruin their props. They're pretty expensive. But it's going to happen. I agree, and I commend Commissioner Solari for his outspoken comments on environmentalism with regards to this project. There is going to be significant environmental impacts. I didn't talk about them specifically, nor am I going to. They're there. Every environmental agency pointed them out. And I'm back to my question, and then I'm going to end. Against all, I'm going to read it so that I state it correctly. What is driving this project forward against all reason and all opposition? That's my question. I think a lot of people would like to know that. That question has never clearly been answered. You know what? I think I skipped an entire page, guys. All right, I'm going to burn through this in a minute and a half.
Please take your
Sorry
time.
about that. I'm sorry?
Take your time.
Okay. No, actually I did. I talked about the need for the project, the fact that, I've not seen an existing need at the existing boat ramp, so I guess I didn't skip a page. So the question, Commissioners, if you would so please, if somebody could give us a brief explanation as to what's driving this project forward against all the opposition, against the fact that the manatee protection plan, the county's comprehensive plan, everything talks about this area being designated for conservation. Why would you take out 1.4 acres of mangroves? Why would you encourage more people to potentially bring in larger boats and more boats into this area that's so environmentally sensitive?
Well, Mark, I'd be glad to take a stab. I think, one, it's pretty clear that the channel has silted in. It is an impediment to use, even by small boats. We saw the slides where people have to push their boat on and off, and in my mind, the channel itself clearly needs to be cleaned out and made navigable again. I disagree with you when you say...
I probably wouldn't argue against that. That's not a big issue for me.
You asked for my reasons, I'm giving them to you. Okay,
No,
please?
I'm just saying.
And I'll disagree with your opinion that the dirt road has had no indications of a negative impact to seagrasses. The seagrass beds out there, particularly in the area where we're removing the muck, and then adjoining that, are not really good quality seagrasses. If you look at some of the videos that are out there, there's a lot of sediment in that area. It's sparse coverage. The blades themselves are a pale green. They're not a good, healthy, dark green. Like you, you're a biologist. I am too. I do have a degree in marine science. I've snorkeled hundreds of seagrass beds, and I can tell you those beds off Oslo are not anywhere near lush or pristine or anywhere in good condition. So
Are you talking in the channel or adjacent?
In adjacent, too. 0 to 20% coverage in that area is not great. It's just not. I'm sorry, but that's a very low coverage for seagrass.
I would agree with that statement, but I thought that was in the channel, not outside of it.
No, in the channel it's less than, well, it's 1.5 or less in 6 different seagrass surveys. Outside the channel area is 0 to 20. So, if you look at that sediment runoff, if that were a mining operation discharging into the St. Sebastian River, everybody in this room would be screaming bloody murder. Stop that discharge. It's killing the river. And yet here, for some reason, that discharge seems to be okay. And I disagree with that point of view. I do believe that sediment runoff has a big negative impact. And if you look at the last month here of September, 23 out of 30 days we had rainfall. And I think the first or second day of October continued that. That's a month of turbidity and sediment runoff impacting those seagrass beds. I think that's a negative impact. Now, you may disagree, but that's my reasoning. Now, it's been proposed that why doesn't the county just dredge the channel and then not pave the road? What will happen then is, since there's no restriction on parking on Oslo Road, once we've cleaned the channel out, and I agree with you, probably more people will use it because now it's going to be navigable. I understand that. But if we don't pave the road, then what happens there is it reverts back to unlimited parking. And if your fear is increased use in that area, the worst thing we could do to address that issue is to not put in a limited number of parking spots and control and restrict that. Because they will park up and down Oslo Road, and you'll have more than 12 boats going there. So when I look at this project, my reason for supporting it is I think it will have a net positive impact by removing the muck. And it's not just the muck close to the ramp, because when the boaters are leaving and coming back in, they're still stirring that muck up with their pot, particularly because they're going slow at that point. So as you said, they're lower in the water column, and that just resuspends that muck, and that's a negative impact to seagrasses, I believe. So I think removing the muck is good for the seagrasses. It's good for the lagoon. I definitely strongly believe that eliminating the dirt runoff will have a very big positive impact on the seagrasses. And then you had mentioned the speed zone change as a backroom deal. That's forced upon us by the permitting agencies. It wasn't anything we threw out there. We opposed it, but it was part of the permit condition they imposed on us. So if you have a concern with that, I'd talk to the permitting agencies.
So you will put that out for public comment when you move forward with that?
We will, because we'll have to change the ordinance, and I think there's a whole process we have to do. Bill, is that correct?
Correct. There'll have to be a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, so there will be. But I did want to ask you that, because you brought up a good point. Do you run your boat through there at high speeds during the summer, the unregulated season?
I do.
Okay.
In fact,
that's fine.
just yesterday, but that's perfectly legal, and I'm not
Mark,
running close to the shore.
Mark,
I'm probably
I agree
halfway
with you.
between the intercoastal and the shoreline.
We're on the same page.
We're
But
on
yeah,
the same page,
yeah.
Mark. I agree with you. You've got a flats boat, I'm sure, because you're a guide, so you can run through there at high speed. I get that. Paul Drittenbass, another guide, has told me he runs his boat through there at high speed. So I think a lot of folks run their boats through there at high speed. My question to you is, as a biologist, as a former U.S. Fish and Wildlife, how can you document scientifically any negative impact to the resources by 12 boats going through there at slow speed instead of all these boats running through there unlimited, which apparently hasn't had a negative impact? So can you tell me scientifically how 12 boats going slow speed is going to have a negative impact compared to the boats going through at high speed?
Yeah, I can answer that. And I'm going to lead up to that answer by saying that the conservation's lands and the existing boat ramp have been in relative harmony for 50 years. I'm not disputing that runoff is an issue, but what you're dealing here with, and I think another person who is more knowledgeable than me is going to talk more about it, but it's existing sand and shell and rock, which is normal material that's found all throughout the lagoon that's on that road. And yes, there is a little bit going in there that's indisputable, but the system out there is thriving. For 50 years, that impact has been occurring. Now you're proposing to put asphalt out there, and I think Mr. Gilmore, Dr. Gilmore might make some comments with regards to the effects of that asphalt and the leaching of toxins that could be harmful to the juvenile fish that utilize that area. With regards to the number of boat slips, right now, again, I mean, there may have been a day or two when there's been a lot of boats parked along Oslo Road, but for the most part, there's very, very few boats that are parked there. And I would say that by 12 boats going at slow speed through that area, technically, I would argue that based on the current use in the area and what Mr. Solari pointed out about just unintentional impacts from increased usage, yes, there will be more of a disturbance to the conservation area and the wildlife that lives there. There will be a higher potential incidence of seagrass being impacted because you can't guarantee people are going to stay in the channel. And the other issue is the manatees. I mean, that's a high-use manatee area. And whether they're going slow or not, the manatees are out there feeding, and just boat traffic in that vicinity could negatively impact them. And what nobody talks about is 1.4 acres of mangrove swamp and wetlands that's going to be filled in to allow this paved boat ramp or paved parking area. If you don't want more than 12 boats to be there, well, then do what you're suggesting in your permit. Post a sign on the existing road that says no more than 12 boats can park on this road. Problem solved. You don't have to pave a parking lot, put spots in to put a sign up to say no more than 12 boats.
Okay.
I have one question for
Commissioner Zork? Yep.
Yes, since you kind of have the unique opportunity of being a prior Fish and Wildlife, and that's the right agency.
Correct.
Were you
United
there during
States.
the Jamie Clark days, or was that after you?
No, that was it. I left in 1995.
Okay, so that would have been, well, not too far off, but when the agency publishes rules and St. John's publishes rules and the guidelines and the county, whether it's this project or something else, and it says you're going to go through these 1,200 steps and then be evaluated and critiqued, and then you're going to address those comments and you're going to move forward or not move forward if you didn't address them. what process are you supposed to follow if you don't follow the rules? And if any of these other reviewing agencies had said no, we wouldn't be here. I mean,
they did say no. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers denied the permit in 2011, and I'll quote, "The project does not appear to be consistent with the Indian River County Manatee Protection Plan. The incidental take of manatees cannot be authorized at this time due to the requirements of the Marine Mammal Protection Act." It also goes on to say, "Fill discharge as proposed would not be in compliance with Section 404B1 guidelines, and that the project is not comply with the Corps' wetland policy." And those are the reasons they denied the project. It'll be interesting to see if they can find a way around this. But yes, there are guidelines to follow for the agencies, but some of that is subjective. And keep in mind that the St. Johns River Water Management District also came out, everybody that commented on this project initially came out and said that it would be a negative project for the resources, and in most cases against their rules and regulations. Now, I have here in my hands the issued St. Johns River Water Management District permit, which I read, and I also read this long point-by-point dissertation of how the staff biologists justified the issuance of this permit. Quite honestly, if I was those biologists, I'd never show my face in public again. It's actually a pretty pathetic evaluation. But interestingly, they do not mention in this evaluation, when they're talking about the impacts to wetlands, they don't mention the acreage impacted, which is 1.4 acres. It's never mentioned in here when they're talking about the impacts to wetlands, which I find interesting. But they do point out when they're talking about seagrass in here that it's been shown that there's a very small 1.5% amount of seagrass in the proposed dredge area. I would say, with regards to seagrass, that we have had one of the clearest, and I spend my life out there, we've had one of the clearest water conditions that I can remember in the summer months, up until September when the rain started, and now it's like milk out there. So silt and turbidity are not unknown to the lagoon. But I would argue that this summer was so clear, which is when most of the seagrass grows, that the last survey that was conducted by St. John's Water Management District was done in April of this year, which is kind of early in the season to be measuring seagrass. It's within the limits of measuring for it, but it's at the very early stages of it. But I would argue that if you went back out there at the end of the summer and surveyed, that you'd find considerably more seagrass. It was my understanding that the seagrass percentages that were mentioned here were relative to the proposed dredge portion of the channel and the proposed section that's further out from the dredge, but not to the sides. I mean, I fished in that area for years, and that's thick, healthy seagrass in there. So, I don't know where they're actually doing their quadrats. It was my understanding that the St. John's Water Management District woman just came out and was throwing a little quadrangle in various areas of the channel and then looking and seeing what the percent cover was. But again, I would argue that in April there was probably much less cover of seagrass this past April when she surveyed than there would have been before all these rains started and clouded up the conditions.
And as you mentioned, that the Army Corps comments from 2011, those have yet to be received yet, so that's an open comment opportunity.
It is, and I encourage everybody to comment on that Army Corps of Engineers permit. It'll be interesting to see when they had very good reason to deny this permit in 2011, what, if anything, has changed in the project that will allow them to justify issuing it, other than the proposed changing of the manatee speed zone, which would kind of diffuse the bomb with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service argument about manatees. And
I know some of the earlier comments you mentioned might have been pre-2011, possibly. I didn't keep track of all the dates that you had.
Yeah, there's letters that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, all the usual commenting agencies to federal permits, they all wrote and I've seen a lot of these types of letters in the past, and they were extremely strong letters coming from those agencies.
And during the timeline, using rough calculations, the project has been reduced in scope by about 75%.
It has been cut back from 3...
Because of those comments, I believe.
Yeah, but that's like saying, if I say I'm going to go out and shoot 10 people, but I agree to only shoot 2, I mean... I apologize for that. I apologize for that comment, but you get where I'm coming from. The impacts to an already stressed ecosystem out there are tremendous, and any additional impact, whether it's 1.4 acres or whether it's 3 acres or whether it's 20 acres, is significant.
And I've only had the opportunity of speaking with you on the phone when the phone was actually handed from our mutual friend to you, and that was kind of our first introduction. And I don't know if I had said it to him or to you, is the balance between people trying to launch these small flats boats or canoes or other things that are having to carry their boats out past this area where the sediment has filled up. And to me, those pictures of the rainfall showing the white milky substance in the water, and I don't know if we had to do this or not, but did we do a column profile of the sediment to say it is from the runoff from the road?
I don't know, but there's definitely runoff coming off that road. It's been coming off for 50 years. But the question at hand is, I would suggest that you get some experts to come out and evaluate the seagrass beds that are out in that vicinity and make a determination as to whether they look degraded. They don't. The seagrass beds are thriving out there, with the exception of the actual channel. What's happening is every time someone launches a boat and they go through there, they're stirring up that silt in the channel. And when they do that, and I don't even want to call it a channel. Maybe it's a prop dredge channel. I don't know. But that the sediment is very soft and silty in there.
Right.
And seagrass has roots, and it has to attach. Well, every time a boat goes through that channel, the prop wash is probably uprooting the seagrass, which is why there's a very low coverage of seagrass in the, quote, muck area. But I would argue adamantly that outside of that, quote, muck area is a Florida aquatic preserve with thriving seagrass beds, mangrove communities, salt marsh communities, in an area that's been purchased with money that was given to the county for conservation.
Right, and I don't know if I should, again, as the phone was being passed back and forth, but the balancing between the needs of the flats boat people, the canoe people, the people that are just going out not to fish or catch anything, but just to go out and look, is how do you balance the needs of they need a safe, shouldn't be carrying at low tide their boats out from the back of their trailer out. I mean, they do it, and some probably don't because they can't physically do it anymore. Yeah. Is the improvements to the Erman Park, all of these things you have, in my mind, this is how I've had to look at it, because I did campaign on the lagoon. I'm very staunch for the lagoon. If in this room, how many people's family has been here 100 years? Okay. So there's not that many of us. I have the fishing stories of my grandfather, great-grandfather, my own father taking me out there. So I look at the lagoon very seriously and try to, in dealing with, when we were in business with our family, we always said, how do we take the emotion out of an equation and try to quantify the pluses and the negatives and come up to a overall gain, benefit, loss, or whatever it happens to be. And that's how I'm looking at this is, what are we gaining? What are we losing? What's the overall improvement to the reducing the sediment and the turbidity as even a small John boat with an electric motor, I think, is kicking up some of that sediment at low tide because it's so loose and anything that goes through there, and if it's on an incoming tide, and I'm not a scientist by any means.
You can dredge out the sediment. I don't really have a big issue with that, but it's just going to come back again. Most of that sediment, a good portion of that is organic material, and whenever you have a deeper depression in a bottom, it's going to settle in there. So all the algae and the seagrass that gets loosened up from the bottom, the waves are going to wash it in there. It's going to rot. That's where a lot of that quote,
and some of that may be the mangrove leaves that fall down and
they're going to settle into the deepest section, which is there. I'm I'm going to get down from here unless you have any more specific questions
but
for me.
I
I'm taking up
appreciate the
way too much
conversation.
time. I know there's a lot of people that want
I
to
did just have a
comment.
couple things, Mark, to clarify. The St. John's folks did do a May 2014 survey after the April one you referenced, and that one was only 1.4% coverage.
When in May was that? Because they did one in the end of April. That was St. John's. And when was the May one done?
I don't know the exact date. Just they did an April 2014 and a May 2014.
May 1st. Okay, well, May 1st is essentially April. So that's the very beginning of what's allowed for viewing seagrasses.
I agree with you that the seagrass can't root in the muck because that first wave action or prop wash will lift it out. As far as the dirt road, that's not a natural old coral reef that everybody's running down there. That's a man-made road.
Right, but it works.
And according to the Public Works, we bring 50 cubic yards of road material every 2 years down there to maintain it.
You are adding to that. I was unaware of that.
Yes, every 2 years, 50 cubic yards. So a lot of that going in is the runoff from the road. And then the last thing, a lot of people bring up the fact this is conservation lands, and they're absolutely correct. But I think probably the greatest criticism this board has gotten is every time we've spent taxpayer dollars to purchase lands for conservation, we get criticized because the public doesn't have access to it. And in my mind, conservation does mean some type of use. It's not preservation where you're going to lock it up and throw the key away and tell the public, even though you spent your tax dollars to purchase this, we're not going to let you on it, near it, see it, or anything. We get criticized for the lack of public access to a lot of these lands that were purchased through the conservation program. And I think and I appreciate everybody here that's going to speak and all of theirs, but we have a balancing job to try to find a balance between protection and use. And we can't just say, okay, we bought this land, we're going to put a gate up and no one's allowed in to use it.
I respect that. I understand what you're saying. But I also have the grant agreement from Florida Forever here that has 15 specific conditions, 16, spelled out with regards to how those lands are to be managed. Passive recreation is allowed in those lands. They encourage people to use those lands. I agree with you 100%. But my argument is that improving a boat ramp, putting in a paved facility, is not passive use, especially in a conservation area. So I've been trying to acquire a copy of the management plan that was supposed to be produced as a condition of this grant award agreement for these state funds to be used to purchase lands. I have been unable to acquire one. I contacted the state of Florida. They did not respond back to me. But in that agreement, in that requirement for a management plan, there is supposed to be a definition of what's considered passive use, and I would be surprised to see a boat ramp listed in there as passive use.
Well, the boat ramp was there when we bought it, Mark.
No, I understand that. I'm talking about a management plan, and I know the boat
We
ramp
do
was
have
existing
that.
there, but to improve
Bill,
it and
can you-
encourage more use is the question at
Check
hand.
with Roland, or there's Roland there.
Here comes Roland.
Smile, Roland.
He is.
Sorry, Roland. This is not a personal attack, Roland.
Sorry about that.
He doesn't smile too much. That's the
I really don't want to eat up everybody's time here. There's a lot of people that want to.
Because you know what, this is
Good discussion.
This is what we've been missing.
This is
the
what I
interaction.
wanted
You
to
asked some
happen.
good questions as far as
Right.
why do we feel the way we feel? Where did we arrive at it? Answer our questions. You deserve that. And so, as far I kind of viewed this whole meeting today as
Great.
this is exactly what I wanted to have happen, and I hope that
Yep.
I feel sorry for the people that are behind you, but Mr. Chairman, I rest assured is going to allow everybody to speak as long as they feel like they need, in my opinion.
Yep.
I have to be somewhere at
Roland, could
midnight.
you answer the question about the management plan, please?
I missed some of the question while I was coming over
The
here.
microphone is
But I
it
did.
close enough, maybe?
It is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Mr. Yanno was just asking if he could get a copy of the management plan for this area.
For the grant agreement, not the Oslo River Conservation Area, but there's supposed to be a specific conservation plan for the grant agreement that was awarded for monies under Florida Forever to purchase?
Yeah, the program is Florida Communities Trust, and we do have a approved management plan that was approved by the state and the county. The particular management plan I think that's being referred to relates to the Oslo Diamond Tract, which is the tract closest to the river. It was incorporated into a bigger management plan that was approved for the remainder of the conservation area south of Oslo. The approved management plan does specifically reference the Oslo boat ramp improvement, and it actually makes reference to the parking associated with the proposed improvements would serve also as parking for access to the conservation area. But it is available, and it is it actually makes reference to this project within the approved plan.
Okay.
Okay, great. I'd like
Mark,
to get a
would
copy of
you
that.
give your contact information to Roland, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that? Okay?
Okay. Let me, so Roland is improving the boat ramping facility, specifically listed as passive recreation?
Well, the boat
That was
ramp
what I
is
was trying to find out.
Yeah, the boat ramp and the right-of-way is not within the conservation area. So, but it is referenced within the management plan because it's adjacent to it, and it would provide an opportunity for parking access not only to the boat ramp but also to the passive recreational use of the conservation area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Mark, earlier we were talking about draft and a boat getting in, and you explained about the tires.
Yes.
We seem to be very focused on the ramp, the pitch. Could we talk about the draft of a boat? I walked out there, and I was up to here in the water, okay? And I didn't hit that cap rock you're all talking about. But it's there. I know it's there from the overhead. But when I got out and I was this deep in water, would a boat be able to have that draft and the prop be able to be hitting that grass? I understand about prop wash.
Yeah, sir. To answer your question, the area that they want to dredge, from what I've been told, is outside of the aquatic preserve and is on lands that the county has deed to, the submerged lands the county has deed to. Any dredging of a channel will not be allowed under the aquatic preserve rules. So this channel, as proposed, is stopping right at the boundary of the aquatic preserve. So you've got a nice deep channel when you remove the muck, dead ending in shallow water with seagrass in an aquatic preserve. That's a fact.
But
So you're encouraging more boat use in an area and dumping them right into a Florida outstanding waters, an aquatic preserve. By improving the boat ramp, you're encouraging, whether you intend to or not, you're encouraging more use in the area, and there will be secondary impacts. That's indisputable.
I understand there'll be more usage, and that was also clarified many years ago by one of the speakers coming up had indicated that when we went from 39 parking spots, and there were 3 of us on the board at the time, I believe it was 39, and then it was back down to 14, but it was 17, it was 19, and we were debating the numbers, and the gentleman said, that's about right, that's acceptable, that's not going to create that influx that we're concerned about.
It's a paid facility that's going to encourage more
I
people
understand
to
that.
use
And
it.
you said earlier about the 13 parking spots. If we put up a sign that said you can only have 13 trailers here, how would you propose that that could be enforced? And which one is the 14th trailer? Which one gets the ticket? Which one gets the tow job? Which one gets the law enforcement enforcement?
Yeah, sir, you're going to have that same problem with a paved area there. You still have to figure out how you're going to enforce it.
Well, if it's controlled by environmental design and there are limitations by the way it is designed to ensure that only 14 vehicles are parked there, I think that's far more effective than waiting for somebody to come out with a ticket book.
Yeah, it might be, but you could pass an ordinance as a county commission that you only want to have 12. I mean, you could pass an ordinance that says we're only going to allow 12
I would
boat
fully
ramps.
support that. However, as far as enforceability, I think the environmental design that's been brought forward would limit that amount of parking, and the 15th
There
car
would be-
that parked in there would
Right.
limit any access whatsoever because there's no available space. Correct?
Currently, there is not much space for parking trailers, which I think has been the largest deterrent for people using that area. Yeah, there are people that park alongside the road, but I would welcome anybody to make the argument that the proposed project won't increase boat traffic use in that area, regardless of size.
And you never supported this project in any way, shape, or form?
19 years ago, I stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich because I used to deal with these types of projects, exactly what we're discussing right now, day in and day out, multiple projects. I burned out very quickly because, to be quite frank, money and politics overrode the environmental rules almost every time. And I just got tired of beating my head against the wall. So that's why I'm a fishing guide. I kept trying to apply the rules.
Please.
I kept trying to argue that the agencies should enforce the rules as they have them, but they were always trying to find ways out, ways around them, ways to allow people to do what they wanted to do regardless of what their responsibilities were. I'm not saying they did anything illegal, although that's a gray area, but they were always trying to find a way to allow people to do what they wanted to do. And it was frustrating. It's frustrating for the people here today. They're seeing what I saw back then on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate your input.
Thank you, and I apologize for being here up here so long.